I sat alone at my Mill's deathbed while her children abandoned her and never showed up to say goodbye. When she passed, the nurse handed me a sealed letter and a cold brass key. Only after, her last whisper echoed, names, instructions, and my phone began buzzing. You know that moment when everything you thought you knew about someone just shatters? What if that person was your mother-in-law, lying on her deathbed, and the truth she whispers reveals a betrayal so cold it chills you to your bones, making you question everything about the family you married into? The heart monitor in room 221 at St. Luke's in New Britain kept up this steady, almost mocking rhythm, like a metronome trying way too hard to be comforting. Then it skipped, dragged, and I knew what was coming. I just didn't want to admit it. I was 36 back then, just a beer truck guy, running deliveries out of Hartford. That's what my wife, Avery, always called me. Just a beer truck guy. And I was the only one in that hospital room while my mother-in-law, Lucille Hartman, lay dying. The place reeked of antiseptic, but underneath that, there was that sweet, metallic decay. You know the smell? The one that hits your nose and tells you this is the last stop. A muted baseball game played on the wall-mounted TV. No volume, just players moving around like ghosts. I kept my eyes on it because looking at the clock felt worse. Nurse Carla Ruiz poked her head in every hour, asking if I needed coffee, something from the vending machine. I kept telling her I was fine. She didn't believe me, but she stopped pushing. She saw what I was doing. I wasn't waiting for Lucille to pass. I was waiting for her daughter and son to show up. They didn't. I called Avery 9 times that night, left voicemails, texts. Tyler, too. 5 calls to him. They both answered once, briefly, said they were in meetings but would head over soon. Then nothing. Just those stupid thumbs-up emojis, like we were confirming brunch plans. I swear, if I'd gotten one more cartoon hand from either of them, I might have thrown my phone at the nurse's station. Lucille hadn't spoken in over a day. Just shallow, fluttery breathing. But then, right when I was rambling on about her neighbor's dog finally stopping its barking at the mailman, a stupid, mundane thing, she reached out. Grabbed my wrist like she was 50 years younger. "They think I don't know," she whispered, her voice thin but sharp. My heart pounded. I leaned in, asking what she meant. She shook her head. "Don't press the call button." Her eyes locked onto mine, suddenly clearer than they'd been in days. "Avery and Tyler aren't coming. They weren't coming yesterday either." Her hand tightened. "There's a key for you. Storage. Route 5, Unit 193. "Only after?" I asked, confused. "Only after what?" She didn't answer at first, just stared at me like she was memorizing my face. Then she said, "Promise me." I nodded. "Yeah, okay. I promise." Because when a dying woman asks, you don't argue. You don't ask for clarification. You just say yes and hope you'll figure it out later. Carla walked in right as the monitor's beep stretched into that long, thin line that never ends. I didn't move, didn't blink, just let Lucille's hand slide out of mine like she was the one letting go of me. Carla turned off the machines. She didn't say "I'm sorry" or anything soft like that. Just walked over, handed me a sealed envelope with my name in Lucille's sharp, careful handwriting, and said, "She was lucky to have you." I didn't trust myself to speak. Anything I said would have come out wrong. Too angry. Too raw. I shoved the envelope into my jacket and walked out like I had somewhere to be. I sat in the parking garage for 10 minutes, car running, hands on the wheel, but not driving anywhere. Lucille was dead. I was the only one who showed up. I hadn't even married into this family by blood. And still, I was the one holding her hand. I kept staring at the elevator entrance, wondering if Avery would even ask how her mom died, or if she'd ask whether I remembered to pick up the dry cleaning for her client dinner first. I stepped inside our house, dropped my keys in the dish, and sat at the kitchen table without turning on the light. Just that dim, under-cabinet glow Avery liked for mood. Lucille's envelope felt stiff in my hand, its edges sharp, like it didn't belong in our house. The brass key clinked out first. Clean. Cold. Heavier than I expected. It had a little tag attached with Lockbox RT5 US 193 written in Lucille's neat block letters. The letter itself was short. No fluff, straight to the point, like she didn't see the need for any sentimental buildup. She wrote that she'd seen who her kids were, not in a moment, but over time. They chose themselves, she wrote, and left me to manage my own decline. I read that line 3 times. Then came the real punch. I kept records. Facts. Shut mouths. That sounded exactly like Lucille, only colder than I'd ever heard her get, even on her worst days. She told me to trust Martin Feld, and to trust myself more. That part didn't hit right. It felt like she was talking to someone else. I wasn't the guy people trusted with final wishes and storage units. I was the guy who hauled pallets of IPAs and got made fun of at family dinners for not wearing a tie. I put the letter down and stared at the fridge. The glossy white paneling Avery picked out because it photographed clean. I heard her heels before I saw her. Sharp, staccato clicks up the walkway and through the door. She came in around midnight, still in her work clothes, looking like an ad for her own design firm. She kissed my cheek like it was protocol and dropped her purse on the counter like she lived somewhere else entirely. "How's Mom?" she asked, without sitting, already reaching for a LaCroix. "She passed at 4:18, I said. No build-up, no soft landing. Just the truth. Avery froze, fridge door open, the cold air humming against her legs. "God, the timing," she muttered, like Lucille had been inconsiderate for dying midweek. I waited for something. A tear. A sigh. A second question. Instead, she turned and said, "We have Mercer Lang coming for a design pitch Friday, so I need you to handle the hospital paperwork. Just get whatever they need. I can't cancel this one." She started talking about a backsplash tile she found in Soho, like we hadn't just lost the one person in her life who still called her baby and meant it. I kept my mouth shut. The envelope and the key stayed folded in my jacket pocket. She didn't ask. I didn't offer. She went upstairs before 1 a.m. I stayed down, reading the letter again under that soft yellow kitchen light. One line stuck harder than the others. They never asked who I was, only what I had. That sank in deep. I'd watched Lucille spend holidays waiting for a text back. Listen to her make excuses for her own daughter when Avery wouldn't show up for a chemo appointment. And still, Lucille didn't go bitter. She went precise, quiet, but deliberate. I thought about how she taught me to make her chicken cutlets. Real thin, pan-fried, not oven-baked. She said Avery always hated cooking, always hated the smell of grease in her clothes. So Lucille showed me instead. She slipped me $20 for gas the night she taught me, called it a bribe for loyalty, and smiled like I was doing her a favor by just being there. I hadn't thought about that night in years. Now it wouldn't leave me alone. Avery didn't come back down. I sat in the dark until the ice in my glass melted into nothing and the room felt colder than it should have. Around 1:30 a.m., I pulled out my phone and texted Tyler. "She's gone." He responded 20 minutes later with one word, "Brutal," and a skull emoji. I stared at that stupid emoji for a solid minute. That's what his mother's death was to him. Brutal. With a cartoon skull. If I'd had the key in my hand right then, I swear I might have gotten in the car and driven straight to Route 5 just to get out of that house. Instead, I sat there until the ice turned to water, and the only sound was the fridge compressor kicking on and off. The silence in that kitchen wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that creeps in when you start realizing the people closest to you stopped seeing you a long time ago. The next morning, Avery asked if I could swing by the funeral home after my deliveries, like she was sending me to the dry cleaners. I told her I'd take care of it, and I did. But first, I drove to lockbox storage with that brass key in my hand and Lucille's words running laps in my head. I didn't even clock out. Just told Manny I was grabbing lunch and got in the truck with that key in my pocket and Lucille's voice sitting on my shoulder. Lockbox storage was right off Route 5, behind a strip mall and a Dunkin'. Easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. But I wasn't guessing. I knew exactly where I was going. Unit 193 was down the third row, a dead end. No cameras I could see. I slid the key in like it was nothing. It turned smooth. The door rattled up with a bang, like a garage on bad springs. It didn't look like storage. No clutter. No stacks of old lamps or busted vacuums. Inside was clean. Too clean. A folding chair, one of those beige metal ones from church basements. 2 filing cabinets side by side. Everything labeled in Lucille's neat, tight handwriting. I read the labels once, then again. Banking, medical, Tyler, attorney, and then proof. My stomach twisted. That was the one that did it. Not the names, not the medical stuff. Proof. You don't label a drawer that unless you know someone's going to need it. I opened it first. Right on top was a spreadsheet, color-coded. Rows of payments Lucille had made on behalf of Avery and Tyler. Hospital bills, loan payments, even groceries. Every single one marked, promised reimbursement. Almost none of them fulfilled. I flipped through printed bank statements, emails, Venmo screenshots. Tyler's tone went from, "I got you next week," to "I thought I paid that," to nothing. One email had him writing, "My bad," after Lucille reminded him again about the $22,000 she'd fronted for his dealership float. Another folder was all about Avery. Instagram prints, beautiful lighting, perfect table settings, captions about family first, with Lucille nowhere in the pictures. Then texts, Avery telling Lucille, "Mom, it's just not your scene," when Lucille asked to be included at Thanksgiving. Another read, "I'll try to swing by after the mixer. Can you warm up dinner for me?" Like Lucille was staff. I opened an envelope with a cheap voice recorder inside, pressed play on the first file. And there it was. Avery, clipped and impatient. "You don't have to be dramatic," she snapped. "It's just a ride." Lucille answered, soft, almost embarrassed. "The chemo makes me tired, that's all." "Well, then take an Uber," Avery said. "I'm booked through 6. Lucille's voice dropped to a whisper. "Okay, honey." She sounded like someone used to apologizing for needing anything at all. I sat down on the folding chair, felt it creak under me. My head was buzzing like I'd stuck my finger in an outlet. This wasn't petty stuff. This was deliberate, sustained, cold. I wasn't just holding evidence. I was holding a story no one had wanted me to hear. Then I found the legal envelope. Last will revised. Notarized 2 months before Lucille passed. I held my breath reading it. Avery and Tyler each got a keepsake. Nothing big. A cameo brooch for Avery, a box of family photos for Tyler. Lucille wrote that the rest of her money, $62,000 and some change, should go to 3 local charities she supported. Then came the line that made my chest tighten. The remainder goes to Dorian, for reasons known to me and anyone paying attention. There it was. My name in a legal document. No fine print. No loophole. Just there like I'd earned it. I didn't feel proud. I felt knocked sideways. Attached to the will was another folder. Property deed for a cottage in Old Saybrook. Address handwritten on a sticky note. 12, Harbor Lane. Go there first. Then Martin. I had never heard Lucille mention a cottage. Not once. 21 years she'd owned it. And I hadn't even known she liked the beach. The last folder was the smallest. A stack of deposit slips for an account in my name. Opened 3 years back. Every couple of months, a few $100. Looked like birthday cards. Holidays. Over time, it added up. Just shy of $8,000 now. The sticky note on the front said, "For Dorian's backbone." I knew he had one before he did. I leaned forward, hands on my knees, and stared at the floor. Concrete. Cool. A faint oil stain near the door. That was all that kept me grounded. This was not how inheritances worked. Not in the real world. Not for guys like me. Lucille didn't pay me for being good. She documented everything because she knew they'd come for it later, and she wanted someone to be ready. She'd made me her clean exit plan. I put the documents back in order, slid them into my delivery tote, and locked the unit like I was sealing something sacred. I sat in the cab of my truck for a minute, not driving, not calling anyone. I needed to think. Then I opened my Maps app, typed in 12, Harbor Lane, Old Saybrook, and hit directions. Because I wasn't going home yet. The GPS said I'd arrived, but it didn't feel real until I saw the cottage. It was tucked behind tall beach grass and a low, wobbly fence of driftwood someone clearly put there for charm, not security. Flagstones led up to a short porch where a wind chime made from spoons clinked like a laugh Lucille might have let slip when no one was watching. The place wasn't big. 1 story, gray clapboard, white trim, but it looked solid. Lived in. Not a single for sale vibe in sight. I pulled the key from my jacket and slid it into the lock. It turned without a squeak, like it had been waiting for me. The door swung open into air that smelled like lemon oil and salt water. Clean, warm, real. The kind of smell you only get when someone cares about the space they're in. Inside was like walking into Lucille's memory. Only this one had color. Her paintings were everywhere, framed on the walls, leaning on shelves stacked near the door. Boats mostly. Big sky scenes. Late daylight. One of a little girl in a red jacket standing on a dock with her back turned. I stared at that one for a long time. I didn't recognize the girl. Maybe no one did. Maybe that was the point. On the kitchen table was another envelope, this one thicker. My name was written in the same all-caps block letters as before. I sat down to open it, hands still rough with road dust and nerves. The letter inside had more heart than the first one. More fire, too. Lucille didn't waste space with grief or apologies. She got right to it. She said Avery would say I manipulated her. That Tyler would throw around threats and legal jargon like candy at a parade. They'll say you isolated me, she wrote. But they were gone before you ever sat down in that hospital chair. She'd attached a letter from Dr. Ingrid Shue, a capacity evaluator neuropsych, dated 6 weeks before she passed. It spelled out that she had full cognitive capacity, no signs of coercion or delusion, and had made her decisions with deliberate independence. Lucille had clearly planned every inch of this, like she knew exactly what fight was coming. Further down the letter, she told me this cottage wasn't just hers. It was her. Her before the treatments, before the guilt, before being someone else's job to handle. This place reminded me I existed, she wrote. Use it for company, not hiding. That line got to me. I walked through the place slowly, like if I moved too fast, I'd break something. Every room was warm, simple, full of little signs that someone had loved being there. No high-end appliances, no designer tile. Just cast iron pans, a sun-faded quilt, and stacks of sketchbooks near every chair. The bedroom closet held one thing that stopped me flat. A garment bag. I pulled it out, unzipped it halfway, and saw a navy blazer hanging perfectly on the hanger. No plastic wrap, just fabric and weight. My size. No tag. Inside the lining was a note, pinned to the seam with a safety pin. Wear this to the reading. Armor isn't only for soldiers. I sat on the bed and held the blazer like it might speak. Then I stood up, slipped it on, and stared at myself in the full-length mirror across the room. It wasn't tailored, but it didn't have to be. It fit well enough to feel like a version of me I hadn't met yet. Not the guy Avery rolled her eyes at during dinner parties. Not the afterthought. I looked like someone who didn't duck out of hard things, even if I still wanted to. I went out to the porch and called Martenfeld. He answered on the second ring like he'd been waiting. "This is Dorian Hartman," I said, voice steadier than I felt. "Lucille said to call you." "She told me you would," he said. "Come tomorrow at 2:30. Bring the documents, and bring any courage you've got left." I didn't know whether to laugh or throw up, but I said, "I'll be there," and hung up. The sun was dropping low when I wandered into the backyard. The lawn was mostly sand and patchy grass, but along the fence line was a half-built raised bed, rebar sticking up like arms halfway through a job. A stake stood in the center with a packet of marigold seeds rubber-banded to the top. She planned to plant them, or planned for me to finish it, maybe both. Inside, there was a little desk tucked against the wall near a window with peeling trim. A legal pad sat in the center, still open. A pen. I didn't plan to write anything, but I found myself sitting down, staring at the empty lines. And then I wrote, in big block letters like hers, "I will not be ashamed for showing up." I underlined it twice. Then I closed the notepad, hung the blazer by the front door, and turned out the lights. Martenfeld's office sat on the second floor above a bait shop, a brick building with narrow windows looking out over the harbor. Inside smelled like old wood polish and paper. Framed photos of schooners lined the walls. A quiet message: "I've been here a long time and I don't scare easy." He stood as soon as I walked in, hand extended, firm grip, eyes sharp but not unfriendly. He glanced at the blazer and gave me a nod, like we both understood what it was. "Armor." "Take a seat, Dorian," he said, pointing to the chair opposite his desk. I laid Lucille's documents down in a neat stack and sat. My hand stayed flat on my thighs to keep from fidgeting. Martin leaned back, eyes flicking to the door like he already knew what kind of entrance was coming. Avery blew in 10 minutes late, clicking heels on hardwood like a performance. Perfect hair, fresh makeup, a cream-colored blazer, and pants set that probably cost more than my whole truck. She didn't look at me right away, just dropped her purse, smoothed her lapel, and sat across the table like she'd been summoned for a deposition she thought she'd win. Tyler came in right behind her, all puffed up. Color popped on his navy polo, fake smile already plastered on. He gripped Martin's hand too hard, like he was closing a deal. "Good to finally meet," he said. His voice was bright, but his eyes kept darting to the folder in front of Martin, like he was checking the score before kickoff. Martin didn't bother with pleasantries. "We're here to read the will of Lucille Hartman," he said. "Before we begin, I want to confirm for the record that Dr. Shu's capacity evaluation is entered. Lucille Hartman was of sound mind, fully competent, and acted independently." He slid a folder forward and tapped it once. "Any questions before I start?" Avery crossed her arms. "I'm sure we'll have some later." Tyler smirked. "Let's get on with it." Martin reached for a small speaker on the corner of his desk and rolled it forward like a desk piece. "You'll hear some of this from me, but most from Lucille herself." He hit play. Her voice filled the room, calm, measured, unhurried. She listed her small keepsakes first, sounding almost apologetic. "To my daughter, Avery, I leave my charm bracelet and my regret." She paused, long enough for the words to sting. "To my son, Tyler, I leave a box of photos and my hope you'll look at them." Avery's chin tilted upward, but her jaw tightened. Tyler shifted in his chair, eyes narrowing like someone had thrown cold water on him. Martin continued reading. "The remainder of the estate," he paused, "will be detailed shortly." Lucille's recording went on. She explained in plain words what was hers, what she'd put aside, and what she was doing with it. No legal jargon, just Lucille, making herself heard in a room where she wasn't alive to sit. Martin looked up. "For clarity, the West Hartford property is, and always has been, titled in Lucille Hartman's name. There is no joint tenancy with right of survivorship. You have been living there under her ownership." Tyler shot to his feet, palm flat on the desk. "That's not true." "She told me." Martin raised a single finger. "Sit down, Mr. Hartman. It is true, and the deed is here." He tapped the document. Tyler sat slowly, eyes flicking to his sister like he'd lost his footing. Avery finally turned to me, eyes cold. "He manipulated her," she said, voice sharp as glass. "He had access. He isolated her. I didn't move." Martin reached forward and hit play on another file. Avery's voice came through. "Recorded clean." "We'll talk after my pitch," she said. Lucille's voice small. "I'm too tired to drive, honey." Then nothing. Silence in the room after the audio stopped felt like a dropped curtain. "Context," Tyler barked. "You're cherry-picking." Martin didn't flinch. He opened a binder and slid out bank logs. "Context." His voice stayed cool. "Here's context." He laid down the printouts. "A transfer of $22,500 to your dealership, labeled vendor float. A sticky note from Lucille, repay in 6 months. 15 months later, an email from you, my bad. And no repayment since." Tyler's face flushed red, his hands curling into fists on his knees. "That was temporary." "It was theft," Martin said flatly. "And documented." Then Martin opened another folder I hadn't seen him touch. He slid color copies across the desk. "Mrs. Cole," he said, using her former married name. "Payments to Ethan Cole. Notes. Consult. Property Scout. And this one, Mother's Place Prep." My ears rang. Ethan Cole, my softball buddy, the guy who'd helped me move furniture. I stared at the printouts, felt my stomach drop. Martin kept talking, but I barely heard him. I didn't need his quiet explanation. It was clear. Avery and Ethan had been planning to move on Lucille's assets once she was settled, whatever that was code for. They'd been lining up the shot before the game even started. Avery reached for the copies. "This is a gross misrepresentation." Martin put a hand down lightly. "Not a threat, just a line. You can take a picture. You can take it to your attorney. But you will not take the originals." Tyler's voice went low. "Ugly. We're taking you to court. All of this. Every single bit is undue influence. You isolated her. You coerced her. This won't stand. We'll see you in front of a judge." Avery added. Martin clasped his hands, eyes on them like he'd been waiting for this moment. "If you file, all of it goes public," he said. "Every text, every email, every audio recording, every medical letter confirming capacity." He let the words hang. "Your call. Just know the cost." Avery's mouth opened, then closed. Tyler stared at the desk like it had insulted him. Neither spoke. Martin didn't push. He just sat steady, like a man who had time. I felt the blazer on my shoulders. Heavy, but steady. For the first time since Lucille's hospital room, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to show up. I was already here. 3 days after the reading, I opened my front door and found a man in a windbreaker holding a thick envelope with my name across the front in heavy black ink. He didn't even ask who I was, just handed it over like it weighed nothing and said, "I'm sorry, man." He looked past me, maybe hoping I'd just shut the door and make it easy for both of us. I nodded once. "Not your fault," I said, and closed the door behind me. The envelope was warm from the sun. I didn't open it for 10 minutes. I sat on the couch with it across my knees like a hot plate and just stared at the corners until I felt like I was stalling for no one but myself. The suit was 20 pages long and read like a story I'd never lived. They said I'd willfully and deliberately isolated Lucille Hartman, coerced her into significant changes in estate planning, and exerted financial pressure for personal gain. That last line would have been hilarious if it didn't have my damn name under it in bold. I skimmed faster as my stomach turned. Everything Martin had warned me about. There it was in legalese. Accusations dressed up like facts. Evidence twisted into suggestion. Every time I'd picked up a prescription or sat through a doctor visit now painted like strategy, like I'd been working some long con instead of just showing up. Avery started calling that night. Left the first voicemail like we were in a negotiation. "Dorian, this is all unnecessary. I think if we can both be reasonable, we can resolve this quietly." Next one came 12 hours later, voice tighter, clipped. "I'm trying to keep this civil, but if you force our hand, then you'll regret this. You know you will." Tyler didn't bother with words. Just texted skull emojis and the word thief like he was 12. I didn't respond to either of them. I didn't have the bandwidth. I went to work the next morning, tried to focus on invoices and delivery routes, but I missed a turn on the way to a convenience store and backed into a steel post unloading crates. Nate, my boss, pulled me aside in the warehouse after I clocked out and said, "Dorian, man, maybe take the rest of the month. Figure your life out a bit." He wasn't wrong. He wasn't cruel about it either. I shook his hand, promised to stay in touch, and walked out of there with my last check in one hand and nothing else in the other. That weekend, I packed the basics. Work boots, clothes, Lucille's letters, the will, the deed, and drove to Old Saybrook for good. No plan, no announcements, just a quiet move away from the version of myself that kept waiting for people to change. I'd barely unpacked when the Hartford Chronicle ran a piece titled, "Family Feud, Designer Sues Son-in-Law Over Will." The photo was of Avery, smiling in a navy dress. Not me. I didn't even get a bad picture. I got a name in the headline and a whole lot of strangers' opinions. I read the comments until I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Half of them assumed I was some broke moocher who married in for a payday. One guy called me a gold digger with stubble. I stopped reading after that. People love messes they don't have to clean. The cottage was quiet in the best way. No ticking clocks. No one asking if I could run to the store or resend a file. I found Lucille's journals in a canvas bin in the linen closet. Dozens of them. Cheap, spiral-bound notebooks with color-coded stickers on the sides. She didn't write poetry or long essays. Just little things. Tuesday. Light bulb above sink went out. Dorian fixed it. I didn't have to ask twice. Coffee with Rose. She said my hair looked nice. I said it was a wig. We laughed. Dinner. Chicken cutlets. I still miss hearing "thank you" to. Those entries knocked something loose in me. The ones that hit the hardest weren't about what she'd lost. They were about what she'd noticed and kept to herself. In one of the sketchbooks tucked between the journals, I found a diagram that looked like a puzzle. A drawing of the backyard, arrows from the old shed to a spot marked studio, another to a square labeled tea table, then to tools, then neighbors with nothing to do. Lucille had drawn a place before she ever said it out loud. I started picturing it, not big or fancy, just a place where older folks who got overlooked could come and fix things, or break them, or just sit with a cup of weak coffee and be remembered. That night, I stood at the edge of the backyard with a flashlight and looked at the frame she'd started for that raised bed. I thought about everything she'd put in motion before she died, quietly without fanfare. I decided right then, if I made it through court without losing everything, I'd build it. I'd call it Lucille's Workshop. No slogan, no membership forms. Just a long table, a pot of coffee, and maybe a bulletin board where people could tack up birthdays and photos and names they didn't want to forget. Ethan messaged me sometime after midnight. His name lit up my screen like a mistake. Man, it's not what it looks like. That's what he wrote. No apology, just a hedge. I didn't respond. Didn't even let the read receipt go through. Because it looked like betrayal, and that was enough to cover most of it. The next morning, Martin called. His voice was calm as ever. First hearing's been scheduled, he said. New London. 2 weeks. Don't be late. I'll be there, I said. You don't have to like this, he added, like he was reading my thoughts. You just have to show up. I didn't tell him I'd already started sketching out lumber dimensions for a long workbench. Didn't mention that I'd printed out a flyer template that just said, Lucille's Workshop. Coffee. Talk. Projects. All are welcome. I just said, yeah, I got it, and hung up. The courthouse in New London looked like a place where bad news got handed out in envelopes, and the hallway smelled like coffee burned 2 hours ago. I wore the blazer, not for show, but because Lucille told me to. Armor isn't just for soldiers. I figured if I had to walk into that courtroom with people who thought I was a thief, I might as well look like someone worth listening to. Courtroom 4B was packed tighter than I expected. Reporters in the back row. Some folks from Lucille's old church. A guy from the Chronicle scribbling notes on a legal pad like this was some gripping drama, not the tail end of a woman's life being dragged through paperwork. Judge Alvarez sat up high, silver hair tied back, glasses low on her nose. She had the air of a high school principal who'd sent enough kids home for fighting to spot trouble before it started. Martin leaned over and said, Don't react unless I say. Just keep your hands on the table and your eyes on me. I nodded once. Avery and Tyler sat across the aisle, both dressed like politicians, dark, polished, rehearsed. Their lawyer, Paula Jean, had the voice of someone used to charging by the hour. She stood right up and started talking like we were all in the wrong room. Your Honor, she said, this case is about manipulation, not inheritance. About a vulnerable elder pushed by a man with motive, access, and a lack of oversight. Judge Alvarez raised a brow. You referring to Mr. Hartman? Yes, Your Honor. Dorian Hartman, a delivery driver with no legal background, no caregiving credentials, and no familial blood tie to Mrs. Lucille Hartman. Mr. Hartman inserted himself into Lucille's life in her final year. He was present at her death. He took control of her mail, her access, her finances. This will was revised mere weeks before her passing, cutting out her biological children and granting Mr. Hartman, again, a son-in-law, control of her estate. She paused, then added, There is a clear pattern of isolation and undue influence. Judge Alvarez didn't flinch. And your proof. We will demonstrate through messaging records, absence of prior gifts, and the shift in language in Mrs. Hartman's revised will. Martin finally stood. He moved like someone with time. Not slow, just sure. Your Honor, let's begin with Lucille Hartman's medical records. This is a report from Dr. Ingrid Shue, dated 6 weeks before Lucille's passing, confirming full capacity and awareness. Signed, witnessed, and notarized. He passed it to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. She flipped through it without a word. Martin continued. Next, we have audio recordings, all taken with Lucille's consent. She requested they be made in case this very moment arrived. He clicked a button on the small speaker on the desk. Tyler's voice played loud and clear. I can't come by, Mom. Jets are on. It's a divisional game. Just rest. All right. Lucille's voice, barely above a whisper. Okay, honey. Martin let that hang, then clicked to the next. Avery. I can't bring you to brunch, Mom. It's not a good look for my clients to see a walker at the table. I'll come by tomorrow. All right. Lucille. I understand. It's okay. It wasn't. Martin laid out the bank records next. Charts. Printed checks. Highlighted texts. Exhibit C, he said, is a record of a $22,500 loan to Tyler Hartman, labeled vendor float, with an expected 6-month repayment. 15 months later, Tyler wrote, and I quote, "My bad. No repayment was made." Tyler leaned toward Paula and whispered something hot and fast. She waved him off. Martin kept going. Exhibit D, Venmo screenshots. Payments from Avery Cole, then Hartman to Ethan Cole. Notes include consult, property scout, and one that reads Mother's Place Prep. He looked up. This was while Lucille was still alive, still competent, still asking her daughter for rides to chemotherapy. Paula stood, trying to object. These screenshots lack context. Judge Alvarez cut her off. They seem clear enough. Do you have evidence suggesting otherwise? She didn't answer. Martin stepped back to the speaker one more time. Final exhibit. A video recorded in this office. Lucille appeared on the small screen, seated upright, hair covered in a scarf, face pale but eyes sharp. If anyone's watching this, she said, it means I'm gone and they're trying to undo what I chose. She looked directly into the lens. Dorian didn't want my money. He wanted me to matter. My children wanted me to disappear when I was inconvenient. So I made choices. If they're angry, they can be angry. But I hope they're also quiet enough to hear the truth. The courtroom went dead silent. No throat clears. No paper rustling. Just that kind of stillness people get when there's nothing left to pretend about. Judge Alvarez sat for a beat, then looked down at her notes. Miss Jean, 2 questions. Paula stood straighter. Yes, Your Honor. Was Lucille Hartman legally declared incompetent at any time? No, Your Honor. Do you have any signed, dated documents stating Mr. Hartman coerced her? No, Your Honor. Then I'll be brief. She looked up, glasses sliding down just slightly. This court finds the will valid. Capacity was sound. No evidence of coercion or undue influence. Mr. Hartman acted within his legal rights. If there were a section in probate law for filial cowardice, I might add it. But there isn't. She banged the gavel once. We're done here. Outside the courtroom, cameras clicked like locusts. Tyler brushed past me on the sidewalk and hissed, "You snake. You ruined us." Avery, standing near a reporter, said loud enough for the microphones. He weaponized grief. That's what he did. I didn't look at either of them. I walked to my truck, started the engine, and didn't exhale until I was out of downtown. The next morning, I filed for divorce. Martin had already structured the inheritance as separate property in Lucille's language. Clean. Untouchable. Avery's lawyer tried to puff his chest, said we could negotiate terms. That stopped cold when Martin offered to enter the voicemail transcripts as evidence. Ethan sent me a long text, something about boundaries and mixed signals and the pressure of proximity. I blocked him without answering. I wasn't looking for explanations anymore. Some words just meant what they meant. Betrayal doesn't come with clarifiers. I spent the cold months with a hammer in one hand and Lucille's sketch pad in the other. The cottage stayed quiet, heat humming low through the baseboards, and I worked out back in the shed with fingerless gloves and a propane heater buzzing like a jet engine. It wasn't fancy. I wasn't trying to impress anybody. I cleared the space, patched the roof, and added shelves out of scrap, wood from the dump pile behind the hardware store. I built one long workbench from old cedar planks and leveled it with coins under the legs like Lucille used to do when a table rocked. I mounted a pegboard, hung up hammers, screwdrivers, and a level with no bubble in it. Bought a coffee urn at a church rummage sale for $5 and set up a corner with mismatched mugs and a tin of sugar that clumped in the cold. I found 6 folding chairs at Goodwill and scrubbed the rust off the hinges until they stopped squealing. Then I stuck a handwritten sign at the edge of the road with roofing nails. Lucille's workshop. Coffee. Talk. Small projects. No hours, no prices, no promises. That first Saturday, I expected to spend it alone. Maybe sand a picture frame or fix the broken handle on the back gate just to keep my hands busy. But around 9:30, an old red pickup pulled up slow. Out stepped Walt Briggs, 71, gray beard to his chest, and hands like twisted rope. "Heard you could use another set of calluses," he said, holding a toolbox older than I was. 20 minutes later, Mabel Esposito knocked, holding a cracked wooden tray and a sleeve of sugar cookies. She told me she'd been a cafeteria lady for 34 years and missed the noise of people. Gene came last. He didn't say much, just nodded once, walked in, and sat near the window with a busted stool and a sanding block like it was already his. We spent 3 hours fixing a wobbly chair someone had left out by the post office. Drank weak coffee. Talked about nothing that made the news. Mabel told a story about a 4th grader who tried to trade a lunch tray for her car keys. Walt taught me how to splice 2 kinds of rope and joked that a good knot could outlive a bad man. Gene didn't talk, but he laughed once when Walt tripped over the extension cord, and that counted for something. When Mabel left, she hugged me tight and said, "I haven't used my hands all winter." That stuck with me harder than I expected. The next Saturday, 5 people came. The one after that, 8. By April, we had 12 regulars. Some brought tools. Some brought chairs. Most brought stories and things that needed fixing. Lamps. Broken frames. An old jewelry box with a busted hinge. People brought what they had. They also brought seed packets, jars of screws, cookie tins full of mystery hardware, things they couldn't throw away but didn't know what to do with. I kept a notebook under the coffee pot and wrote down lines when I remembered to. Gene sanded a board like it insulted him. Walt taught me a better way to tie off twine. Mabel said her joints hurt less when she laughed. The Hartford Chronicle came back for a follow-up piece. This time, the headline was nicer. "A son-in-law builds a place his mother-in-law would have loved." I still cringed reading it, but the article wasn't bad. They quoted Walt saying, "It's not therapy, but it works." Mabel said, "We have the best coffee on the shoreline," which was a flat-out lie, but she said it with a smile. Calls started coming in from other towns. Groton, Killingworth, even one from Providence, asking how to start something similar. I didn't have a kit or a process. I just said, start with a table. Then listen. One Wednesday afternoon, Avery showed up. She pulled into the gravel like she was late for a Zoom call. Dress pants, tailored coat, hair perfect, heels that didn't belong anywhere near dirt. I met her halfway down the drive. "I came to make amends," she said. "Amends start with truth," I said. "Not photo ops." She looked past me toward the workshop. I just thought maybe I could be part of the story now. I nodded slowly. "You could have been part of the story a long time ago." She shifted her purse. "That's not fair. I was busy. I had clients. I was busy, too. I showed up anyway." Her smile faltered. "You're angry." "I'm honest," I said. "Have you paid Lucille's estate back for anything?" Her face stiffened. "That seems punitive." "Then we're done here." She didn't touch a tool, didn't take off her coat, just stood there long enough to realize I wasn't going to soften, then turned and walked back to her car. Her heels were loud on the porch boards as she left. A week later, I got a one-line email from Tyler. "Can we be family again?" I didn't respond. Not out of spite. Not to make a point. I wasn't keeping score anymore. I was keeping promises. Around that same time, a woman named Claire knocked on the workshop door during cleanup. Said she was a social worker from Middletown. She'd read about us and asked if she could volunteer 2 afternoons a week. I asked, "You know we don't pay, right?" She smiled and said, "Good. I don't like paperwork anyway." We stuck a post-it on the wall that said Claire, coordinator, and got back to work. The morning of the memorial, I woke up before the sun, pulled on the same navy blazer Lucille left me, and set up folding chairs across the lawn like we were preparing for a backyard wedding. Claire brought lemonade and a big tin of oatmeal cookies. Walt showed up with his grandson and a 6-pack of ginger ale. Mabel wore a sun hat decorated with clothespins, said it made her feel artsy. Jean arrived early and wiped down every bench with lemon oil before I could even ask. By noon, we had almost 90 people scattered across the yard, front to back. Some brought flowers, some brought tools. A few just came with a quiet presence, like they didn't need to say anything. They just needed to be there. I stood at the front of the shed with my hands in my pockets, watching the crowd settle into their seats. A few folks nodded at me like I should say something. I'm not a speech guy. Never was. But I cleared my throat and stepped forward anyway. "I don't have a fancy story," I said. "I just want to say Lucille didn't want to be remembered for dying. She wanted to be seen while she was still alive." People shifted in their seats. Eyes up. I looked out at them, then down at my hands. "Seeing people is work," I said. "It's not a sentiment. It's not a like button. It's showing up when it's not convenient. It's remembering how someone takes their coffee. It's asking how they're feeling and listening to the whole answer." Nobody clapped, which was good. I didn't want applause. I wanted the silence that meant they understood. Afterward, a professor from Yukon named Dr. Patel came up to me in khakis and sneakers, holding a notebook. "What you're doing here," he said. "It matches everything our research keeps missing. This is what people need. Somewhere they can feel useful, not managed." He asked if I'd speak at a community health conference in the fall. I told him I wasn't much of a speaker. He smiled and said, "You just proved otherwise." I didn't promise him anything, but I didn't say no either. Toward the end of the afternoon, Walt's grandson tugged at my sleeve and handed me a crayon drawing on construction paper. It showed the workshop, wide and bright, with people sitting at a long table. Across the top in big, crooked letters it said, "Mr. Dorian's House of Fixing." I laughed. "You know, that's better than what I had," I told him. He grinned like he just renamed a planet. Then I saw someone standing at the edge of the crowd. Tyler. He looked thinner than I remembered. Hair longer, shoulders smaller. He held an old metal toolbox, like it weighed more than it should have. He didn't say much, just walked up to me and asked, "You need help painting that bench?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at the toolbox, then at him, and nodded. "Yeah, that'd be good." We painted in silence for a long time. I handed him a brush. He didn't ask questions, didn't make jokes, just worked. After 2 hours, when the bench was dry and the sun had dipped behind the trees, he pulled a folded cashier's check from his jacket and laid it on the table without looking at me. "I sold the jet skis," he said. "It's not all of it, but it's a start." I didn't say thank you. I didn't shake his hand. I just nodded once and picked up the brush again. That was enough. Avery didn't show. Later that night, I saw she'd sent me an email offering to curate the workshop's aesthetic and elevate its impact through professional branding. I read it twice and still didn't know what half the words meant in this context. I closed it without replying. The workshop didn't need branding. It needed chairs that didn't wobble and people who meant what they said. After the last guests left and the cookie tin was half empty, I sat on the back steps with a cup of lukewarm lemonade, watching the dust roll in. The year had started in a hospital room and ended here, on solid ground, in a place built with hands and old wood and promises kept. Claire came out with her jacket on and said, "Gronin's Community Center asked if we could come by next week, maybe talk about setting up a workshop there." I smiled, sipped my drink. "We'll bring coffee, extra screws, whatever we've got." When the yard went quiet, I walked back inside, took Lucille's charm bracelet off the hook by the door and touched it once. The way you tap a doorbell without thinking. I don't pray much, but I said thanks. 2 summers later, I sat at a folding table in a church basement in Montville, across from 12 people holding clipboards and coffee cups, all nodding like I just explained something useful. I'd done this talk 6 times already, but it still felt weird being called a community founder, like I wore a badge or had some kind of certificate. I still felt like the same guy who used to stack kegs at 6 a.m. and thought volunteering meant moving your cousin's couch. "I'm not here to sell you a program," I said. "You need a space, a table, and someone willing to keep showing up. That's it. Everything else you'll figure out." They asked good questions: insurance, code compliance, liability waivers. And I answered best I could. Claire usually handled that part, but she'd thrown her back out moving mulch at the Groton site, so I was flying solo. The foundation we built wasn't fancy. It was a Google Doc, a checking account, and a mission, one workshop in every county that wanted one. No fees, no branding, just sweat, coffee, and someone keeping a notebook, so the little victories didn't get swallowed by the bigger world. Dr. Patel helped us with a grant proposal. I kept stopping him every other paragraph to ask, "Can we say that in English?" He laughed the first few times. Then he started writing everything like it was meant for someone who'd never been to a conference, which was the point. We kept Lucille's name on the letterhead. That wasn't negotiable. One night in May, I got a call from a Vermont number. I almost didn't answer. Then I did. It was Ethan. He said he'd moved north, cleaned up, got out of real estate. I was a mess, he said. Still kind of am. Then he paused. I know I don't deserve much, but I want to apologize. No strings, no ask. I just wanted to say it. I waited a second, then said, I believe actions, not speeches. He didn't argue. A week later, the foundation got a donation, $500, from a name I knew. No note. I let it sit on the kitchen table for a day. Then I deposited it and used the money to buy a second-hand planer and a better coffee maker. People noticed the coffee first, then they noticed the planer. Tyler never said sorry, not directly, but he kept showing up. Saturdays mostly. He'd bring donuts, hand out sandpaper, remind folks to double-check their cuts. One time he fixed a drawer for a woman who lived 2 towns over, and she told him, You've got your mother's smile. He didn't answer, just nodded and wiped his hands on his jeans. That was as close to growth as some men ever get. It counted. Avery sent a letter. 5 pages, front and back, handwritten. She blamed the market, their upbringing, the expectations of their social circles. It read like a weather report that forgot to mention the storm she made. I didn't reply. Some doors are better closed and sealed with nails. The day we opened our 4th partner site in New Canaan, a woman in her 80s handed me a photo. Lucille sitting on a folding chair at a church picnic in 2002, holding a styrofoam plate and smiling like someone had just told her a secret. She held my hand when my husband died, the woman said. I never forgot that. I took the photo and taped it to the side of the register. It stayed there. People sometimes ask me what justice looks like. I tell them it's not headlines or judgments or payback. It's this, a place where folks show up and leave better than they arrived. And the ones who try to make you small, they have to live with the fact that you built anyway. At the end of the day, when I lock up, I touch the charm bracelet hanging by the door and the sleeve of the blazer next to it. And every time I hear Lucille's voice again, armor isn't only for soldiers. She was right. I didn't win money. I won my life back. What would you have done if your spouse's family betrayed a dying parent like that? Would you have fought or walked away? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.